Hi, welcome to Sit With Me. I am your host, Tori Christina, and we are here today to continue our conversation on mental health. We know that each of us have those issues at one time or another in life. It can just hit you where you really have to be intentional about making sure that you are healthy mentally, but also spiritually. So that is what this platform is for. No, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health counselor, but I will be bringing you professionals, therapists, counselors, and even everyday people that deal with their mental health and ways that they've come out of it. So that's why we're here to share. Hopefully, maybe you'll see yourself in it, or maybe you'll see somebody that's close to you in it, and you'll be able to have the compassion that is needed to be able to support them and stand by them through their process. So today we have our guest here.
Chotsani.
It's Chotsani. Like, I didn't want to mess it up. Like, okay, guys, I told her before we got started, I just did not want to butcher her name.
You got
But
it though.
I know, but I
got
just
it.
be feeling like, I don't want to mess it up. But Chotsani Brown, she is the founder of the Mending Project. Yay.
Yes.
So I want to we'll just start there with the
Okay.
Mending Project. Now, this is not your, it's not
This
what
is
you
not
do.
my trade. No.
It's not your trade.
No,
So what is
no.
your trade?
So I'm a mortgage broker. I've been in the mortgage industry for almost 20 years.
Wow, I didn't know
yeah.
it was that long.
Yeah, for about 20 years
Mhm.
to, different capacities. So I started out as a processor underwriter, and now I'm a loan officer. So I do, pretty much all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so what is the Mending Project?
So I feel like God gave me the Mending Project a few years ago, right?
Mhm.
And I just never did anything with it. So the Mending Project kind of came up again earlier this year
Mhm.
after I had gone through some things. But what I really am hoping that it turns into is a community of people who have been through things.
Mhm.
Okay, we've all been through some things, but I wanted it to be a community where we could support each other. I know a lot of times during, the things that I've been through in life, I was quiet, I was silent. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't feel like people understood. So I really didn't have a network or, a support system.
Mm.
And so I really wanted to be a support system for women that are, healing and going through things and, just a safe place for them.
A safe place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Support systems are important. And that's why
Very.
I said, even with this platform, I want to bring people like there's always mental health awareness, but there also needs to be like mental health acceptance.
Right.
And that comes from my dear
Right.
friend Mike Boyette. I want to give him a shout out. But he said that to me one day, and I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, we need to have more compassion for people that are dealing with traumatic situations
Right.
that really affect their mental health.
Right. And what I've seen is that we kind of gloss over it. We
Mhm.
move on. We don't talk about it. We don't, acknowledge it. We just, suppress everything and move on.
Right.
But I think we got to talk about it in order to heal.
Yeah, definitely. I've always pointed out to people that are around me, like, you do have to address it.
Yeah.
You have to talk about it, because the more you keep it in secret, the more the enemy can use it against you.
Exactly.
Once you start talking about it, then he can't use that
Right.
against you.
You expose it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I know it's there. I know it happened. So you don't have to keep bringing it up.
Let's put it on the table.
Yeah, let's deal with
Yeah.
it. All right. So tell me, how you said the Mending Project came to you when you were
So I would say around 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't say I've had a hard life, but I've gone through some things
Mhm.
in life. And so in 2012, just in, my quiet time, God dropped the Mending Project in my spirit. And he gave me, what it should look like,
Mhm.
what needs it should meet for people.
Mhm.
At that time, it was completely different. But as I went through some things earlier this year, God said to talk about it. Talk about the things that I've been through. Talk about how I healed from the things that I've been through.
Right.
Because there are so many people out there that are going through things, not talking about it. I come from a family of strong women.
Yeah.
We
Me
deal
too.
with it and we move on.
Right.
But that's not always the best way to do it.
Right.
I've made a lot of mistakes along the way,
Mhm.
being strong and suppressing it and moving on.
I think I heard you say on one of your videos, and you can follow her on Instagram at The Mending Project.
Mm,
I heard you say on one of the videos is that we tend to deal with people out of our trauma.
we
Like,
do.
so you and I know that for a fact. Like, when me getting into a new relationship, a new
Mhm.
marriage, and dealing with him, I saw myself blocking my blessing
Oh, yeah, definitely.
because of the trauma from being scared, from not trusting,
Yep.
and that's a real thing.
It's a real thing. The things that we go through in life frame the way that we see the world, right?
Mhm.
So not just personal, intimate relationships, but also relationships with people that we meet every day at work, it
Mhm.
affects every single relationship that we come in contact with. I know I just got married, 4 years ago,
Mhm.
and I did everything I could to push my husband away because that was my coping mechanism.
Right.
That was my way of safeguarding my heart
Not
from
being hurt
pain,
again.
from not being hurt,
Right.
again. And so that all stemmed from trauma.
Yeah.
That all stemmed from the things that I've gone through in life. And, I'm the only person that's going to protect me. So if I don't protect my heart, then it can be hurt again.
How do you think you came to the revelation? Because I'm trying to think of how I came to that revelation that you were pushing him away because of the hurt.
Um, a lot of the I'm gonna say prayer
Mhm.
because my prayer is always God, show me myself, show me what you see that I don't see.
Mhm.
And this man proved himself over and over and over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And out of fear, I basically I was gonna lose him. You know what I mean? If I just live my life in fear. I just decided one day, you know what? And that's not just with the relationship, that's with life, period.
Right.
I'm just gonna live. You know what I mean? Because you're really not living.
No.
You're really not living.
That's good. You aren't living, because if you're living within your own boundaries
Right.
and
Your own
borders, that, yeah,
box.
your own box, and I cannot live outside of this box, because if I
Right.
get outside of it,
I might get hurt.
oh my gosh.
Right.
No, but guess what? In your box, you're going to get hurt. Outside your box,
So
you're going to
here's
get
the
hurt.
thing. That box, yeah, it might keep her out, but it's gonna keep love out too. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's gonna keep you from experiencing life, experiencing love. So
You just
weigh
have
your
you have
options.
to take a chance.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to take a chance on
It's
life.
a risk.
Yeah.
Life is a risk.
Life is a risk.
Yeah.
To live is a risk.
Right.
But to live free is a risk.
Exactly.
But the thing that I found is that when you know that all things are working together for your good.
All things, even the painful things work together
Yes.
for your good. So
And then somebody always tells me that I have to add that for those that are called according to His purpose. So we understand that scripture is for the children of God.
yes.
But also, God reigns on the just as well as the
As the
unjust.
unjust. Yeah.
Jesus died for the sins of the world. So,
Right.
he can still carry you until you get to that place in Him.
Right.
I like that. I like that. So what I saw that, you lost your mother.
Hmm.
So, and your father
Hmm.
and your grandmother.
Hmm.
And so all of them were very special to you, or?
So, just, not to be very long-winded with the story,
Mhm.
but I grew up with both my mom and my dad
Mhm.
in the household until I was maybe 7.
Mhm.
I think about 6 or 7. My dad was abusive. I love him to death, but he was abusive. I saw him, um physically and verbally abused my mom, up until I was about 7 and she decided to leave.
Mhm.
Um, and, my mom and I lived on our own. My dad really, he never really came around.
Mhm.
And so when I had just turned 17. I was 16 and I turned 17 in October. My mom died in December. So like two
Wow.
2 months later. It was 12 days before Christmas. So Christmas has always been a hard time for me. So my
Mhm.
mom was like my everything, right? She
Right.
was everything to me. She was the only parent. But my grandmother was also there. So it was my mom, my grandma, every time you saw one, you saw the other two,
Mm.
So when I lost my mom, that was like taking my breath away. At being young and not really know, I knew God, but I
Mhm.
didn't really have a relationship with him. And so for me, that was my hope, that was my dream, that was everything. I didn't really see a life beyond, beyond the death of my mom.
Mm.
My dad really didn't come around. He didn't come to the funeral. Well, actually,
Really?
he came around that day that
Uh-huh.
my mom died, and my grandmother met him at the door. And she basically told him, if you're not ready to be in her life consistently, then I'm not going to let you see her today.
Oh.
And he left. He chose to leave. So I really didn't see him for years,
Mhm.
after that until I looked for him,
Mhm.
you know. And so I didn't really have a relationship with my dad growing up. It was off and on. He was a very funny guy. He was a very likable guy, very funny guy. So, when we did see each other, it would be, laughter or whatever.
Mhm.
But truthfully, I would act as if, it didn't bother me. You know,
But you were hurt.
I would say, well, he doesn't care about me. I don't care about him.
Mhm.
That was a lie, a complete lie.
Mhm.
So, I didn't really get a relationship with my dad until I was like 28 years old.
Mhm.
And that's because I looked for him. I reached out to him. I wrote him a letter, because I was carrying so much unforgiveness,
I did that with my dad too.
so much pain, so
Yeah.
much pain. And I didn't realize that I had daddy issues until I was an adult, you know,
Mhm.
until I got married. So I had to release it. And so
Right.
I wrote him a letter, like 5-page letter. He responded, "Girl, I'm your dad. I'm your dad. You should love me."
And that's not what we talk about.
No.
My daddy told me, my dad told me, he was like, the Lord gonna handle it. That's not what I'm talking about. I know the Lord, and He's been very good to me. I'm
But
talking
what
about
about you?
you.
What about taking responsibility?
Right.
And I think what helped me to release my dad is I realized that he had issues of his own.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about me,
Mhm.
so I kind of had to accept that.
Mhm.
He ended up apologizing to me. We were really, really close for like 2 years,
Mhm.
and he got sick. He ended up apologizing to me on his deathbed. Yeah.
Really? Oh
So,
my goodness.
yeah. So it was, I
A
think,
lot.
yeah, it was a lot, but I think I would have rather him stay here than to get that apology. That apology, once I got it, didn't mean as much as I thought it did. It
Okay.
would. Um, he was actually there for me during some hard times. So, we were able to build a really close relationship in that 2-year period. And then
Mhm.
he died. So that was kind of hard.
Well, like he said, he's your dad,
He's my dad.
and I that's what I had to deal with my father, and he's always been a part of my life, like financially. He's
Right,
always been there,
right,
never slacked on that. So he
right,
wasn't a deadbeat dad,
right.
but like you said,
Relationship.
the relationship we don't have, and he's apologized before, um, but I think that I that relationship is something that a child needs. I believe that's in a little girl's life or a boy's life. The fathers matter.
They met you. That's why I said I didn't realize I had daddy issues until I was an adult, because as a child, all you know is play. You're playing, you're going to school, you're distracted from it.
Right.
But when you start to build relationships with other people, then you realize, wait a minute, I'm lacking
There's a
something.
void.
There's a void here.
Mhm.
There's something that I didn't get.
Mhm.
Dads for girls validate who they are.
Mhm.
They tell them that you're okay.
Yes.
You're okay being who you are. You are, Your love, that's your first example of love, right?
Mhm.
And when you don't have that, where does it come from? It
Everywhere
doesn't.
else.
It's a void.
Yeah.
And so you spend your time looking for the acceptance, the love,
Right.
it may not be blatant, it may not be something that you're even conscious of, but
It's there.
it's there.
Yeah.
And so I know my first, adult real relationship, it's like I was looking for acceptance. I was looking for the validation. And
Mhm.
when I didn't get it, I
Mhm.
fell apart.
Yeah.
I fell apart. And that's something that I should have gotten as a child.
Mhm.
So, that relationship with your dad matters. It
Matters
matters more than, we think, because it's so common for dads,
to
to
be
not be
absent.
around.
Yeah.
So we
Which
think we're fine.
yeah,
We're really not.
you're not.
And you can see it even with, people on TV. You can
Mhm.
see it. You can see, in their relationships with other people. Well, I don't know if I can see it because I know what it looks like,
Mhm.
but you can see those traits come out.
Mhm.
I think we're wounded.
Right.
We're wounded, and the fact that we don't acknowledge it,
Yeah.
I think it puts us further back.
So that's the encouragement is to when you're having those voids in your life, um, to actually face that head
It's
on,
acceptance.
accepting.
Yeah.
So you're saying like accepting that it happened or
Accept
accepting the person.
right. Well, both.
Mhm.
You have to accept, you know what? My dad wasn't there.
Right.
And because he wasn't there, I have some issues
Right.
because he wasn't there.
Right.
I know we can grow up, we can be successful, we can make money, we can do the things. We can
Mhm.
do, the things that make us look successful.
Mhm.
But what about your heart?
Right.
What about your heart? I covered up a lot of it, you know.
You know what I think is amazing about your story is that you're saying that even though it was what it was, he was able to be there for you
Right,
during some of the most traumatic times in
right.
your life. So it's just I think that God has a way of making it work. You know,
He
even
works
though we make decisions and we mess up his perfect will for our lives,
yes.
like he always has a way to
He
put it back.
factors in our mistakes.
Yeah.
Just because we make mistakes doesn't mean that God can't use those to
Right.
work in our good. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Because, I mean, you could go through some really bad times in your life and think that it is over for you,
Right.
but it's not over.
I will say that every loss, whether that's from my mom, my dad, my grandmother going through a divorce, every loss, I think I lost a little piece of myself,
Hmm.
to the point where I didn't think, where do I go from here? How
Hmm.
do I, put the pieces back together and continue on with my life? A lot of times I didn't think that I could.
Hmm.
A lot of times I didn't think, I thought it was over for me.
Yeah.
It's almost like rebuilding every single time.
So every time something happened, you
Mhm.
felt like you have to rebuild yourself from there.
Yeah. Because it's a blow, and especially when you go through traumatic things like that, if you don't deal with them,
Hmm.
they pile one on top of the other.
Hmm.
So where, it may be that single incident, that happened, and it may not be that bad, but because you didn't deal with all the other things that you've gone through, it feels like a mountain
Yes.
of things. So yeah, I think every single, every single thing that I've gone through, I feel like I had to put the pieces back together and rebuild.
Yeah. So and then so that was your mom, then your dad, and then your grandmother.
Yes.
Okay. So what I always pray for people during a time of loss is that God will allow them to grieve properly.
Right.
Like they would actually go through the grieving process
Right.
so that there's nothing left there.
Right.
What was your grieving process like?
I think it was different each time.
Mhm.
For my mom, again, I was so young, I really didn't understand. Um,
Did you experience, like, being mad at God?
I was so angry. So let me just give you so I never really thought that my mom would die. I saw her, I literally gave up my life, to sit there and to take care of her, my grandmother and I. My grandmother retired so she could sit there,
Mm,
and be with my mom. And then when I got home from school, my grandmother would go home and then I would sit with her, at night.
wow.
And, I literally saw her go from, I don't know if you've seen a picture of her, but we look exactly alike. So
Mm,
I literally seen her go from a, healthy, self-sufficient person to, maybe 90 pounds and not able to walk. But still, in my 16-year-old mind, I trusted God and I didn't believe that she was going to die. Like
okay.
nothing, nobody could have told me that.
Right.
And I remember saying out of my mouth, God wouldn't let my mom die.
Ooh.
And so the morning she had gone into the hospital, and I didn't know this until later, but the doctor had told my grandmother that she only had 3 days to live. So on the third day, I was, I was in high school, but dual enrolled. And so I had a test that morning.
Mhm.
And I was up getting ready to go take my test. And I was at my grandmother's house. My uncle was there with me. And the phone rang.
Mhm.
And my grandmother's house is old, okay? So we had the little rotary dial phone on the wall. So the phone rang. So my uncle picked it up in the back and I picked it up in the front, but he didn't know I had picked it up.
Oh.
And so it was my grandmother telling him, bring her now because she's dying. So I heard that. Nobody knew I heard it. I heard it. And I literally went in the bathroom and I lost it. And I was so angry with God because I was saying, God,
Wouldn't let her.
why would you let this happen? Why would you let her die? I didn't
Mhm.
think you would let her die. Why would you let her die?
Mhm.
And so for me, that was devastating. Because I never, the whole time it happened quickly, the cancer, it happened quickly, like over a matter. It wasn't even a year.
Mm,
Um, but still in my mind, I didn't think she was gonna die.
right.
So yeah, that was devastating.
Because I know a lot of people have that, they get stuck in that place of being, especially
Angry.
as a believer,
Mhm.
being angry with God about how he allows things to play out. Um, wow. And so do you remember when that anger went away or how you dealt with it?
Um, it took years.
Mhm.
It took years for it to go away. So I grew up in church. So I would sit in church and I would sit there mad. I didn't want to hear anything. Nobody say anything to me about God because I felt like God betrayed me.
Mm.
Right?
Mhm.
Um, but I could never get away from God.
Right.
I was still there, but I could never I was still angry, but
Mhm.
I would still be there
Mhm.
in his presence.
Mhm.
And so I would literally, sit in my room. I had a roommate at the time. Fast forward because I was in the 11th grade when she died. And so we're talking 2, 3 years later, I'm still angry, you
Wow.
know. So I would sit, my first roommate in college, I would sit in my room and no lights, no, just quiet.
Mhm.
And I would cry for hours and hours and hours. And she would come and, she would knock on the door, "Are you okay?"
Mhm.
And I would just say, "Yeah." And I was sitting there for hours. I was depressed. I was, like I said, I didn't see a life outside of that. I
Mhm.
didn't have anybody. So, when people were getting married or, things were happening in life, they had their
Mhm.
parents there. I didn't have that.
Mhm.
And that's all I could focus on. I
Mm.
couldn't focus on the people that were actually there. All I
Right.
could focus on was what I didn't have, who
Mhm.
wasn't there.
Mhm.
How I got over being angry with God, I think at that time in my life, um, I think at that time in my life, I just time, time just the anger went away. but I still didn't trust God. That
Mm.
came later. That
Mm.
came years later. You know, I wasn't angry anymore. I was able to, move past it, but I still didn't let my guard down to trust God.
Right.
That didn't come later until later in life.
You know what's so cool about that is that that's why I always tell people, like, I'm not a religious person. I have a relationship with God. I
Right.
am a Bible believer.
Right.
But that's what a relationship is.
Yeah.
You go through
Yeah.
those times where you may be angry at
Oh yeah.
someone, you don't trust them anymore, but that's a
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
That's the
When
beautiful
somebody
part of it.
betrays you, they have to earn your trust again.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that, I'm making God earn my trust
Yeah.
again, but what I'm saying is I think um one of my spiritual moms, somebody said something to me. She said to me, and this is years later, she said, ask God to prove himself to you.
Oh, wow.
And that may have been the single most powerful prayer that I've ever asked, it because it's like he continuously, would do things
Really?
to prove himself and to prove his love for me.
Mhm.
So I think I can't pinpoint one single, a
Event
time that the anger went away. It happened over
over
time.
time. Yeah.
And I think I struggled with trusting God for so many years because of that one incident. It now, so much has happened since then. I have a different perspective at 42 than I did, back then. But I think over time, just God began to prove himself to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that that for me proves that God is a good father.
He
Like
is.
it's a
He really
relationship. Like
is.
he will be there for you when you need him. And for you to be able to pray the prayer, Lord, prove yourself to me, and then he do it. That just lets me know he just loves us
He loves
so much.
he loves like I can't even explain the overwhelming love of God that I feel now
Mm.
that was so far away from me back then.
Mhm.
But that's because I didn't accept it then.
Right.
And when you look at God like a father, your natural father, if he's there and he's a good dad, he's not going to give you everything that you want.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's going to give you what you need.
Right.
And so I think over time I had to accept, it was her time to die. It
Yeah.
was my dad's time to die. It was my grandmother's time to die.
Mhm.
You know, that really had nothing to do with me.
Mhm.
That was their time.
Right.
But my anger was, God, why would you leave me here alone?
Mm.
Why would you leave me here to I didn't know anybody else around me who had gone through what I had gone through.
Mm.
I didn't see anybody else around me,
Mhm.
who people had hard lives. I'm not saying that, I had the hardest life, but I just didn't see that around me.
Mhm.
And it seemed unfair.
Mm.
And so, God being the father that he is, he did work. I'm not, not work in a sense that we know, but he did go, above and beyond to try to prove his love for me.
Mhm.
And does that sound weird when I say that? When I say that, what I mean is not that when I would pray, I would get everything that I prayed for, but just revealing himself
Himself.
in certain situations,
Mhm.
even though it's hard, I'm here with you to walk you through it.
Mhm.
I'm here, I can look back now and see, God, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made it through that. So I can look back and see where, he carried me through those situations.
Mhm.
But at the time I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's strange to say, that God proved himself to you, because it just shows me his love. You know what I mean? Like he really wants a relationship
Right.
with mankind.
Right.
And that's why Jesus died.
Right.
So that we can have that relationship with him. But it in and not that, um like you said, that he gives us everything. it's not that. It's
No.
he knows, like they talk about your love language. God knows
He
your love language.
knows.
He
He
knows
really
you. He
does.
knows everything about you.
But he also knows those voids, and
Yeah.
he knows the like, I like to, kinda describe our heart as layers, like
Mhm.
an onion. And so, he knows how to pull back those layers and, touch on those parts, those places that we don't even know need, healing.
Mhm.
And so I think over the years, he just began to pull back the layers and began to mend those broken places that I didn't realize were broken,
Mhm.
you know? So that's love to me.
Yeah.
That's you love me enough to go to that length to get me to open my eyes and recognize, it wasn't it wasn't about him being, because I know I've talked to people who, are still angry with God and can't understand why they, have had the life that they've had, and, why they've gone through the things that they've gone through. But God does certain things that we go through in life are to make us who he wants us to be, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so sometimes, yes, he uses pain to do that.
Mhm.
He uses pain to bring forth purpose. He uses pain to, get you. he- I've heard somebody say God is more concerned about your character than he is about your comfort.
Mm.
And so, yes, those painful things, those things are painful, but sometimes we go through those to get us to the place that he wants us to be, to get us, our character refined to the place that he wants us to be.
Yeah, because God wants to use us.
Right.
This
Right.
this life is not our own.
Right.
Like he really wants to use us for his purpose. He
Right.
had a purpose in mind when he
Right.
made each and every one of us. And like you said, he has to do some things to get us to be obedient
Right.
to his
Right.
will and his
Exactly.
way.
It
Because we just won't, sometimes we just won't do right. We just won't do
Listen,
it.
I think I would have been out doing my own thing. I would have been doing my own thing had, it not been for God. It's like a pruning. Sometimes we don't know what's in our heart, right? We don't
Right.
know those things that, God wants to remove, or, what he can't use. And so sometimes he sends us through a pruning process, which may be painful.
Hmm.
You know, I was a spoiled brat. Listen, if I cried, I expected everybody, to jump
Wow.
at it. That's how I was raised,
Hmm.
so that's not life,
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's a parenting point right there.
yeah,
I'm learning that now
yeah, yeah,
as my children continue to get older, is that, when you build that spoiled child, it really is not preparing them for the
it's
real
not.
world, because the real world is
It's
not
not
like that. It's
reality.
not reality.
No.
So you have to, my mom told me no a lot of times just because of that. Like,
Right.
I'm just not going to tell you
But it
yes all the
helped
time.
you,
It
right?
definitely helped me.
Yeah.
Definitely helped me. So and then you spoke about the miscarriages.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know. But I do want you to speak on it as freely as you can,
Mhm.
because I know women have gone through this time and time again, and that's grieving as well.
It is very much grieving.
Mhm.
Um, I think if people have not been through it, then they, brush it under the rug, as if it's nothing. You never got to hold that child. You never got to see that child. And so, I think people just move on or
Mm.
don't acknowledge it.
Mhm.
But it really is a death. It's a grieving process. You grieve that, child the same way that you would grieve a child that you were holding. I
Mhm.
don't think it's ever easy to lose a child. And that's, whether that child is here or not.
Mhm.
Um, we've had 3 miscarriages. We've been married for 4 years. So, we've had 3 miscarriages. This last time I think was probably the most traumatic. Um, and I had literally said to God, once I found out that I was pregnant, I said, God, if this is not, my heart can't take it. If this is not you, and if this is not what you want, then I don't even want to be pregnant. It's basically what I said.
Mhm.
And I found out I was pregnant. And so I was nervous. This
Mhm.
was last year in October or November. Um, and so, of course I was nervous. My husband was excited. Um, but we chose to kind of, keep it at bay, not really, display excitement because we had already been through this 2 times before.
Right.
And I am older, so you have to factor that in.
Mm.
Um, but I got to the point where, we went to the doctor, we saw, we heard the heartbeat, we
Oh,
saw the
wow.
ultrasound, we had a due date. The due date was on my daughter's birthday. That's the part that I was like, okay, you know, this is
This is
real.
this
Yeah, this
this
is
is it.
real, right?
Yes.
And so, fast forward 12 weeks, um, we had gone through COVID, and I didn't take any medicine. I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to do anything that's gonna jeopardize, the baby. So, I'm toughing it out, right?
Mhm.
And
But you actually got COVID?
yeah,
Oh,
we had
okay.
COVID.
Okay.
And so I'm feeling guilty, right? Because,
Oh,
no, you don't go intentionally and get COVID, but I'm
right.
feeling guilty. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have gone. I should have stayed home. I should have been, more um
Mm.
care. I should have been more careful.
Mhm.
And so we're home. We're all, my daughter, my husband, we all have COVID, right? So we're just laying around, and I wake up one morning and it started. I don't want
Mhm.
to be graphic,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it started. And
Did you know immediately that's what it was, or
I think yes,
Mhm.
but you don't want to,
Right.
I
I get
didn't
it.
want to accept that,
Yeah.
right? So, I screamed,
Mm.
right? So my husband runs into the bathroom and he's like, go get dressed. We're going to the hospital. So this is New Year's Eve. Yeah. No, this is what was the Friday? Anyway, it's New Year's Eve weekend.
Mhm.
And so it's on a Friday. I
Mhm.
go to the emergency room and I do the ultrasound and they tell me the ultrasound tech wouldn't say a word. She never said a word. So I'm laying on the table, I'm crying, and I had to go in there by myself because of COVID.
Oh.
Right?
Ugh.
So I'm laying there on the table and the ultrasound tech won't say a word. So I'm asking her a question. She's like, I'll have to, I'll let the doctor tell you, I have to let the doctor review it first.
Mhm.
So I go down and this doctor, he was very, very compassionate. He gave me a hug. He said, it does look
Mm.
like, you started having a miscarriage. He said, but I've seen people still go, bleed, but still have a viable pregnancy. So
Mhm.
come back in 2 days and we're going to redo it.
Are you
But wait.
serious?
So he says, come back in 2 days and we're going to redo the ultrasound and we're going to redo the blood work. So I said, okay. The hardest day, I had to go out to the car, and tell my husband. So we immediately drive, he's just driving. Like we don't know where we're going. He's
Right.
just driving, right? So we end up at the beach. We get out, we pray. I can't really say much,
Mhm.
at that moment, right? So the longest 2 days go by. Sunday morning, we get up and go back to the emergency room. I get there, I'm laying on the ultrasound table, and the ultrasound tech says, "Your baby's heartbeat stopped at 8 weeks." I'm 12 weeks.
Are you s
Yeah. So, yeah, she said, "The baby's heartbeat stopped at 8 weeks." So, this
like, how?
how? So, nobody said, the first, emergency room visit, nobody said anything.
Not to get into technicals, but is this at the same hospital? You went to the
Yeah.
same hospital?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Same hospital, same
It's
same people.
and it's so funny that, like, people in that field, bedside manner is so different. Sometimes, like you say, your doctor was so compassionate, then you get
The
somebody
ultrasound
that's
tech who's like,
wouldn't
"Oh,
even like
I'm not gonna tell you," or, the other one who was, like I said, I'm laying on the table, I got tears rolling down my eyes, and she's like, "Oh, your baby's heartbeat stopped," weeks ago. So, um, yeah, so I literally, they wanted me to, you know,
mhm,
try not to be graphic, but, for it to come out,
okay,
and it couldn't. They wanted to give me medicine that would kinda put me in labor or whatever to
mhm,
make, and I didn't have the mental capacity because I had already gone through, I
yeah,
left out the graphic parts, but at home, it was, a continuous process of,
just flow out, just keep
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay,
So, I had already gone through that. Every time you go to the bathroom, it's like, God, don't let it, don't let this
be that,
happen. Yeah,
yeah,
don't let this be that. But, it was. And um I think that incident threatened to send me back to a place of depression.
mhm,
And I say that because I say that because although I had gone through therapy, I had gone through um work, to get myself to a place of, healing.
mhm,
But like I said, our hearts are like onions, right? So
mhm,
there are different layers
mhm,
that we don't even realize is still there.
mhm,
And so having this third miscarriage kind of threatened to send me back to the place that I was, before. And it just felt like one loss on top of the other, and,
mhm.
on top of the other, and I just couldn't understand God why. Um, God, why? Why? Why would you, continue to allow? Um, and it's an emptiness that I can't really explain.
Mhm,
I had set up, all types of registries, and, I had my Pinterest board, with my baby, what I wanted the nursery to look like. You go through all this planning, and then to go home, I still got this big belly, but I go home with nothing.
mhm.
It's a hard loss.
Yeah, that's pretty traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody about their miscarriage
Really?
in that detail. Yeah, I know people that have had
Yeah.
them, but I've never heard anybody talk about it in that detail. And I know that people still go on even after
Yeah.
5 miscarriages and
Yeah.
still trying and
Yeah.
end up having a baby,
Right.
but to go through that is
I heard, I think it was Gabrielle Union who had gone through, like 5, different miscarriages, and, she had done the IVF and everything. And,
mhm,
you know, she mentioned getting to a place where, she felt like, what's wrong with me? Am I not, you know, a woman, to be able to carry,
yeah,
a child. And so I think you go through, questioning your body,
self.
questioning yourself,
Mhm,
questioning, well, what did I do wrong? Could I have done anything different?
mhm,
Yeah. And the first two, I was hurt. I was, we were disappointed, but I was able to move forward
mhm,
quicker.
mhm.
Um, this last one was just so involved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can imagine the back and forth to the hospital and all
Yeah.
of that. That's it's
Yeah.
definitely a lot. So I'm sorry for your loss. And you know I was. I was like,
I
oh my
know.
gosh. Oh,
I was like, I should text her and tell her.
oh girl. Like I was just checking up on him. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh
because we had talked
no.
about it, from the
Yeah.
beginning. So
Yeah. So, but we know the Lord knows. And so it was after that is what pushed the mending
yeah,
project into
yeah.
play. Okay.
Because I would sit. I didn't really have answers,
Okay.
right? I would and I've grown to a place in my relationship with God where I can give him my full trust, right?
Mhm.
I've grown to a place, I've matured in God enough to know, that He does nothing to harm us, but everything that He does or everything that He
Allow.
allows is to make us, right?
Yes.
So, during that time, I would sit at home and, I normally, pray, right?
Mm.
Before I get started, before I do anything during the day, I pray, right?
Mm.
But I couldn't at that time. Like,
Mm.
I just couldn't find the words. And so I would sit with my Bible and I would sit and I would just cry.
Mhm.
I my husband, and he's as loving and as compassionate as he is, he couldn't understand why, I was so broken
Mhm.
by it.
Mhm.
And he was hurt, but everybody else was able to. My daughter went back to school, my husband went back to work. I work from home, so I was home. I was home alone. It's like everybody else went back to their
They
lives.
had something to distract them from
Yes.
that pain.
And I was sitting in it, and it brought back, all the pain from childhood. It brought back all the pain from all the losses, and it just kind of overwhelmed me, right?
Mhm.
And I realized that a lot of the things that I have gone through, half of the people that know me don't know.
Mm.
I never talked about it. I never said, I never acknowledged. People would always say to me, "Oh, you're so strong, you're so strong." And I kind of cringe when people say that,
Mhm.
because strong would indicate that you're not affected.
Mhm.
I was affected,
Mhm.
and so I never really talked in depth with people about what I've gone through and what I felt, the result of going through those things.
Right.
And God said to me, as I was sitting there with tears in my eyes, "Tell your story." And I didn't want to, because I think going through a lot of the things that I've gone through in life, I kind of, it changed my personality, right? I remember being in high school, I was most popular and I was, outgoing and everything. And just going through some of the things that I've gone through, because there are a lot of things that we haven't even talked about, right?
Right.
Going through some of the things that I've gone through, it kind of made me like a turtle, right? You go back into your shell because that's your place of protection,
Right.
right? And so I just kind of became a different person. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so a lot of the people who, yeah, they know I've gone through things, but they don't know how it affected
Affected
me.
you. Mhm.
Yeah. So God basically said, "Tell your story." Because there are so many people out there who have gone through things and be, under the um label of strong, we don't
Mhm.
talk about it.
Right.
We just move on, and so, one of the things that God said, that would be a healing process for me was to talk about it and to tell my story. And so the mending project, where I had in my mind, for it to look, one way, God said, "No. I just want you to tell your story. I just want you to give hope to somebody else who may have gone through the losses, or may have gone through the abuse, or may have gone through, some of the things that you've gone through, and just tell how you healed from it, or how
Mhm.
you're healing from it."
Right.
Because I think healing it's not a one-time
It's
thing.
ongoing.
It's ongoing. It's
Mhm.
something that, I'll probably spend the rest of my life doing, but the fact that I can be open
Mhm.
and now show up as myself instead of trying to cover it up
Right.
and look a certain way in public and go home and be different.
Right.
So
It's like it just is what it is.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
You either accept
I think you
me.
get a certain age and you just be like,
Exactly.
"Hey, I
Exactly.
can't hold this up no more."
I'm tired. I'm tired of that. This is who I am.
This
You
is
either
who I
accept
am.
me,
Yep.
for who I am, or, you know,
Right.
and understand that, a lot of times in my relationships, if anything looked like hurt, this is any type of relationship, friendships, whatever. If anything looked like betrayal, hurt, pain,
Mhm.
I'm done. I'm cutting it off.
You're not even gonna
I'm
let them get that
right.
close to
Right.
yeah.
And That's not healthy. That's a
It's not.
coping mechanism.
Right.
And it prevents you from having healthy relationships with people.
Right.
And so even when I say, this is who I am, accept me for who I am, I'm not saying that I'm not changing.
Mhm.
I'm saying that I'm working. And if you're not willing to go through that process of, me learning and asking for forgiveness, when I cut you off and, it really shouldn't have been that way, or when I shut down and it really shouldn't have been that way,
Right.
I'm learning. I'm learning at 42, right? I'm learning, how to have healthy relationships that
Mhm.
don't, make me revert back to my shell.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot to do with us getting to know ourselves and
Right.
accepting ourselves.
Right.
Like accepting those things that are different about us. And
Right.
that's why I ended up starting this platform. It's me coming into the realization now I've been diagnosed in college, but I'm just now accepting
Right.
that this is what it is. But you have to live.
You do.
You have to live
Beyond that.
beyond that. And you have to surround yourself with people that are willing to accept you for who you are
Right.
and allow you to be. Because everyone that I've really met and that are open enough to talk about their traumas and talk about their mental health, um, they're really special people. Really authentic
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
You have to be really authentic to talk like this.
Right.
And so we may be a little quirky
Quirky.
or a little different sometime,
Right.
but hey,
Hey, I am who I am.
yeah,
And like you said, I've accepted who
yeah,
I am.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
cool. Great. So if give us some words of encouragement or tools maybe that you have used throughout all of these processes. I know prayer has been
Yeah.
definitely
Number
number
one.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, prayer is
Yeah.
definitely number one. A strong relationship with God is so important because He's our creator, so He knows all about us. So
Yeah.
that relationship, like you said, is going to make you.
Right.
You
Right.
continue to nurture that relationship with God, and it's going to make you. What are some other practical tools that you have used? I heard you said you were in therapy, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've gone through therapy. So, first and foremost, like you said, God is our creator. He's our manufacturer, right?
Mhm.
And so if you have a product and it breaks down, you go back to the manual,
Mhm.
to figure out how to fix it. And
Right.
so the manual, the word of God plus, prayer. So that's number one for me. And I do think as people of color and I just everybody in general,
Mhm.
I think we need to go through therapy.
Mhm.
I really do because it opens your eyes to things about you that you don't realize. You're so accustomed to doing things a certain way.
Mhm.
You may not get the result that you want, but you're so accustomed to doing things a certain way that you don't realize that you're doing it. So
Mhm.
I think therapy was huge. One of the things, that I struggled with was having a negative perception, of life, period.
Mhm.
Negative self-talk, all that. So, one of the things that the therapist would have me do was to, write a thought log, right?
Mhm.
All the thoughts that you have throughout the day, write them down
Mhm.
because it'll give you a pattern, of
What you're thinking
what you're
about.
thinking about.
Yep.
And you don't realize,
I
God, my
always say
life
that.
is the way that it is because my mindset,
You're constantly that
yes,
self-talk is
it's huge. It's
huge.
huge. And so, my life is the way that it is because I'm constantly talking negative. You frame your world with your words, right?
Mhm.
And so, that was huge. That was an eye opener for me. Um, the other thing, I think therapy is going to be different for everybody.
Mhm.
But, one of the things that was huge for me was just kind of I don't want to say affirmation, but declaring, certain things over my life. Like
Mhm.
I would wake up in the morning and, I would do declarations or I would do, affirmations because it kind of
You
trains
had to,
your
yeah.
thought process. It
Mhm.
trains you to focus on, the positive
Mhm.
versus the negative. And another thing that I would do, and I tell my daughter to do this, is to write a gratitude log because for so long I focused on the negative.
Mhm.
I focused on who wasn't there. I focused on, what I lost versus what I should be grateful for.
All
So
right.
I think that was huge eye opener for me as well. So it's just kind of, accepting what has been because there's nothing that you can do to change it and deciding that you're going to continue to live life, even though those things happen to you. They don't define who you are,
Right.
but you're going to use that
Right.
and continue to live life and hopefully help somebody along the way,
Right. Exactly. All right. So y'all heard it here. Accept what has happened. Really, it happened. It was terrible, and nobody can take that away from you, but you have to accept it and deal with it. And our goal here is that we all live happy, healthy lives mentally and spiritually. So if you need help, get the help that you need. You can reach out to, I'm not going to do it. The Mending Project, at The Mending Project. Are you on Instagram and Facebook?
So, no, not really. I'm still building, guys. So be patient with me. This is a lot. So you can reach me at the mending project underscore on Instagram. If you want to email me, you can email me at the mending project at gmail.com.
Okay. And this mainly is a support group.
Right.
A support group. If you're looking for support as you go through your therapy, because therapy is
It is
important,
very important.
as you're mending through your processes, you can have a group of women that have been through similar circumstances and situations that will be able to stand by you through your process. So I want to thank you for being on the show today. I want to thank you for being so transparent and open because that's what we need. We
Yeah.
overcome the enemy by the word
Word
of
of
our
our testimony.
testimony, right?
Yeah.
So we all
Yeah.
have a testimony and we ought to share it because you don't have to look like what you've been through.
You don't.
You don't.
You
You
don't.
don't. And there is freedom on the other side.
Right.
I always tell people, I know like this moment in time is rough, but
Keep
after this,
living.
yeah.
Keep living. Keep going.
Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going. This is not the end.
Right.
If you're still here, it's not the end.
It's not. It's really not.
It's really not.
It's not. I told you I thought, at some point, throughout my life that it was the end. It really
It really
wasn't. I'm
wasn't.
so grateful that I continued.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. All right, so you all just listen out for our next episode. We're on every Tuesday. This is Sit With Me. I am your host, Tori Christina. We thank you again.